I took a night job at a local funeral home. The ad was vague. Overnight caretaker needed, good pay. Light duties, no experience required. It sounded too good to be true, but I needed the money. My rent was overdue, and I just quit my warehouse job after my manager screamed at me for the last time. When I showed up for the interview, the place looked normal enough. Small building, brick exterior, a tired sign that read Bradley and Sons Funeral Services. The man who met me didn't give a name. He just handed me a clipboard with a single page on it, a list of rules. There were 7 in total. Rule 1, always arrive at 11 p.m. sharp. Not a minute before, not a minute after. Rule 2, lock the front door behind you. Use the deadbolt. Don't open it again until 6 a.m. Rule 3, never turn off the hallway lights, even if they flicker. Rule 4, at exactly to 33 a.m. A black rotary phone in the embalming room will ring. Do not answer it. Let it ring 13 times. Rule 5, if you hear footsteps above you, ignore them. There's no second floor. Rule 6, at 4:44 a.m. Place a chair facing the viewing room curtain. Sit and stare at the curtain until 5 a.m. Do not blink more than once every 10 seconds. Rule 7, before you leave, say thank you for having me to the empty casket in the center room. Do not wait for a reply. I laughed when I read it. Is this a joke? I asked. The man didn't answer. He just stared at me with eyes that looked a little too tired for someone who should have been home asleep. Do you want the job or not? I shrugged and said yes. He told me the place practically ran itself. Nobody's on the premises that night. All I had to do was stay awake, keep an eye on things, and follow the rules. Easy. I started that night. The front door locked behind me with a heavy, echoing clunk. I turned on every light I could find, just in case. The place smelled like old flowers and something faintly metallic, not blood, just wage. I kept glancing at the rule sheet I'd brought with me, taped to the front desk. It felt ridiculous, like a Halloween prank. Midnight came and went. I sat at the desk scrolling through my phone, half waiting for something dumb to happen. Then, the lights in the hallway began to flicker. I remembered Rule 3. I didn't touch the switch, just watched as the overhead fluorescents buzzed and blinked like they were breathing. I felt my skin crawl. I told myself it was faulty wiring, bad ballast, the kind of thing you see in every horror movie. Still, I couldn't stop looking at the hallway. It felt like it was staring back. At 2 a.m., I went to the break room for a coffee. The pot was cold, but I drank it anyway, anything to stay alert. I passed the embalming room on the way and paused. The door was slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it. I pushed it shut without looking inside. When 2:33 a.m. rolled around, I stood, frozen by the desk. Nothing happened. No phone rang. I exhaled, a little relieved, a little disappointed. Maybe it was all just fake after all. Then, as I turned toward the hallway, ring, one loud, mechanical ring, from the embalming room. I froze. Ring. 2. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just counted. Ring. 3. My mouth was dry. My fingers twitched at my sides. Ring. 4. My brain screamed at me to unplug the phone, destroy it, do something. But I couldn't. I stood still. Ring. 7. My legs locked. I wanted to cover my ears. I didn't. Ring. 9. The sound started to feel deeper, not just in my ears, but in my chest. Ring. 11. My eyes watered. I clenched my jaw. Ring. 13. Silence. The phone stopped. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I didn't sleep that day. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, the rule sheet still clutched in my hand. I had followed Rule 4, barely, but it wasn't the phone that haunted me. It was the silence after, the way the building seemed to breathe when it stopped, like something had been watching, waiting, and that was only my first night. The second night, I almost didn't go back. I told myself I was being dramatic, that it was just a phone ringing in a dark building, and that I was a grown man, not a child afraid of shadows. But my hands were still trembling when I turned the key at exactly 11 p.m. and stepped back into the funeral home. Everything was where I left it. The hallway lights flickered immediately, as if the building was aware I had returned. I checked the deadbolt. Locked. I taped the rule sheet to the front desk again and whispered aloud each line like some kind of prayer. I didn't believe in the rules, at least. I didn't think I did. But some deeper part of me didn't want to risk ignoring them. Not after the phone. Midnight passed in eerie silence. I avoided the embalming room completely. It was like the building had veins, and that room was its heart. I didn't want to be near it. At 1:23 a.m., I heard what sounded like whispering coming from the back hallway. I thought it was the wind, but when I stepped closer, it stopped. That's when I remembered the new note taped beneath Rule 5. I hadn't seen it the first night. It was handwritten, almost childlike. The whispers aren't yours to answer. What the hell did that mean? I backed away slowly, heart pounding. I returned to the front, trying to stay calm, trying to convince myself this job wasn't messing with my mind. That's when something knocked. Not on the front door, on the inside of the viewing room. 3 soft taps, like someone knocking gently from inside a coffin. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I counted to 20, and then I turned the lights off in that hallway. I shouldn't have done that. Rule 3 said to leave them on, but my fear was stronger than logic. As soon as the hallway dimmed, I heard something dragging across the floor, slowly, deliberately, like a shoe or a foot or something heavier. I rushed to the breaker panel and flipped the lights back on. The sound stopped, but when I looked into the viewing room, the curtain had moved. It had parted slightly, just enough to see the edge of a chair inside. Someone or something had been sitting there. I closed the viewing room door. I locked it. Even though I knew it was useless, the rest of the night passed without incident. The phone rang again at 2:33 a.m., and I let it ring 13 times. This time I counted aloud. My voice shook on every number, but I didn't miss a single one. At 4:44 a.m., I did what Rule 6 instructed. I took the folding chair and placed it exactly 3 feet from the viewing room curtain. I sat and stared. For 15 minutes, nothing happened. Then the air changed. The room grew colder, heavier. I blinked once every 10 seconds, counting the seconds in my head. I lost count around 4:57. My vision blurred. The curtain rippled. Without wind, I didn't breathe. I didn't move. At exactly 5 o'clock, the weight lifted. The curtain stilled. The air returned to normal. I stood, legs shaking, and returned the chair to the closet. At 5:55, I made my way to the center room where the casket always sat. Empty, polished, the lid slightly cracked as if waiting. "Thank you for having me," I whispered. I turned to leave, then paused. There was a second note on the desk, a new rule, written in the same typewriter font. Rule 8. Do not ask who writes the rules. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that someone or something had added to the list, or that I hadn't heard a single sound while it happened. On the third night, something changed. I arrived at 11 p.m. like before, but the air outside the funeral home was different, heavier, thicker, like the atmosphere had grown dense with expectation. I unlocked the door, and the scent of incense, sweet, unfamiliar, greeted me from the foyer. That smell hadn't been there before. I checked the rule sheet as usual. Everything looked the same, but this time, a photograph sat beneath it. A Polaroid, aged and curling at the corners, showing the embalming room from the inside. In the photo, the black rotary phone was mid-ring, frozen in motion, but the phone cord was wrapped around something tall, something with a silhouette. My hand trembled as I flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back in red ink were 4 words, "You didn't see it." My stomach dropped. I tucked the photo inside my bag. I didn't want to look at it again. Midnight came and went. The building creaked more than usual. I kept catching shadows in the corner of my vision, but whenever I turned, nothing was there. I forced myself to keep working, sweeping floors that didn't need sweeping, checking locked doors twice, staring at the clock as the hands ticked forward far too slowly. At 1:12 a.m., the lights in the hallway blinked off. Just that hallway. I reached for the breaker panel, but the switches hadn't tripped. Still, the light wouldn't return. Rule 3 said the lights in the viewing hallway must stay on, no matter what. This felt like a test. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped cautiously into the dark. The beam flickered as I moved down the hall. The silence was deafening, like the entire building was holding its breath. I made it to the end, nothing. No movement, no whispers, no figures. But when I turned around, the flashlight went dead. I stood in absolute darkness, unable to see even my hand. Then the lights clicked back on without warning. And now, in the middle of the hallway, stood a chair, a wooden chair, one I'd never seen before, facing away from me, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to blink. But I took one step forward, then another. The air grew colder with each step. When I finally reached the chair, it was empty. But beneath it was a note, folded, yellowed, and damp at the edges. I unfolded it carefully. It was a list handwritten in cramped cursive. At the top, it read, "Names who broke Rule 4. There were 5 names. The 5th was scratched out violently, underneath, in different ink. Someone had written, 1 more, and the debt resets. I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't want to be on that list. I tore the paper in half, stuffed it in my pocket, and turned back toward the front office. But something was wrong. The hallway was longer, much longer, like it had stretched itself while I wasn't looking. Doors lined the walls, doors that hadn't been there before. Some were slightly ajar. I heard breathing behind one, faint, ragged. I walked faster. Another door slammed shut as I passed. I broke into a full sprint. By the time I reached the front desk, I was soaked in sweat and shaking. The hallway was back to normal, only 2 doors now. I collapsed into the chair, chest heaving, mind racing. At 2:33 a.m., the phone rang again. I didn't move. I let it ring. I counted 13 chimes in my head. When the ringing stopped, I waited, listened. Nothing, no footsteps, no shadows, just silence. Then I noticed the rule sheet had changed. One of the lines was now underlined in black marker. Do not speak to the man in the mirror after 3 o'clock. A.M. That line hadn't been marked before. I looked around. There was only one mirror in the building. It hung above the sink in the small staff bathroom. I made a note not to go near it. At 3:17 a.m., I heard crying, soft, muffled from the back hallway, a woman's voice. I stayed in the chair. Rule 7, if you hear crying between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, do not investigate. She is not alone. So I didn't. I stayed put. Every instinct told me to help, to find the source, to prove to myself that it was just pipes or wind or some other explainable thing. But I didn't move. I sat still until the crying stopped. When it did, something knocked gently on the front glass door. Not loud, just once. I looked up. There was no one there. But when I checked the door, a small black feather rested on the welcome mat. I left it there. At 6 a.m., I packed my things. I stepped outside into the cool air and didn't look back. The sun was starting to rise. That's when I noticed. The Polaroid I'd stuffed into my bag was gone. In its place was a new one. This time, it showed the hallway, me standing with my back to the chair, and the shadow was behind me again. But closer now, much closer, almost touching. By the 4th night, I was already starting to question my sanity. But I showed up anyway, 11 p.m. sharp, like always. The moment I stepped through the door, I noticed the change. The walls looked darker, not dimmer, darker, like the paint had absorbed something. The air smelled faintly of metal. I checked the rule sheet, saying 10 rules. But now, a small sticky note was attached to the bottom, in perfect handwriting. Tonight, Rule 6 matters most. I reread Rule 6. If someone knocks from inside the storage freezer, do not open it. No one is supposed to be inside. My stomach twisted. I passed by the freezer every night on my rounds. It had never made a sound before. But now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Midnight passed without incident. I kept my headphones in, but didn't play music, just the silence, helping me stay alert. At 12:45 a.m., the temperature dropped, not gradually, suddenly, like someone had opened the doors to winter. My breath fogged. I walked toward the embalming room to check the thermostat. That's when I heard the first knock, soft, deliberate, from inside the storage freezer. I froze. It came again. 3 knocks, even, rhythmic. I backed away, slow. My heart pounded. Every part of me wanted to open it to prove it was nothing, that maybe the pipes had shifted or a box had fallen over. But the knock came a 3rd time. And this time, it was followed by a whisper, my name from inside. It didn't just sound like someone saying my name, it sounded like me saying it. My voice from the other side of the door, open up, I'm cold. I stumbled back, knocking over a metal tray. The sound echoed like gunfire. I bolted, ran all the way to the front office and slammed the door shut. I stayed there for an hour. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was a trick, my brain playing games. But at 2:06 a.m., the phone rang again. One ring, then silence, then another. I didn't pick up. I remembered Rule 2, never answer the phone after 2 o'clock unless it rings 3 times. This time, it only rang twice. I stared at it until the display went black. That was when I noticed something on the mirror. A smear, like a finger had been dragged across it from the inside. I hadn't touched that mirror. No one should have. I grabbed the cleaning spray, walked to the staff bathroom, and cautiously approached. The smear read, backward, don't look behind you. I backed out. I didn't turn around until I was out of the room completely. The lights in the hallway flickered once, then again, then shut off completely. I stood in the pitch black. The silence returned, heavier than before. That silence that feels like it's pressing against your skin. Then I heard footsteps, barefoot, slapping gently against the linoleum, coming from behind the freezer door. I ran. Again, I didn't care if it looked unprofessional. I didn't care if the security cameras caught me sprinting like a coward. I just wanted to survive the night. By the time I reached the office again, I locked the door behind me and sat in the farthest corner. I pulled out the rule sheet again. The sticky note was gone. In its place was a small fingerprint smudged in what looked like ash. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Almost opened it. That's all it said. Just those 3 words. I turned off my phone completely. I didn't want to know what would happen if I responded. At 4 a.m., the temperature returned to normal. At 5:30, the birds started chirping outside the window, like they always did. And at exactly 6 a.m., the sun crept over the edge of the parking lot. I stepped outside, half expecting the world to be different somehow. But it wasn't. Not yet. As I walked to my car, I glanced back at the building. The front lights flickered once, like a wink. Then they went out. On my dashboard, waiting for me, was a new photo. A Polaroid, same as before. This time, it showed the inside of the storage freezer door wide open, and something inside, a shape, curled in the far back corner, wearing my uniform, face hidden. But on the back of the photo, scribbled hastily, it said, he opened it, don't be him. The 5th night didn't wait for things to escalate at Dove Straighten. When I arrived, the front door was already unlocked. That never happened. I always arrived first. I pushed it open and called out, hello, no answer. The lobby was empty, dimly lit as usual. But something was off. The smell of formaldehyde was stronger. Too strong, like it had been poured on the floor. I stepped behind the counter. The rule sheet wasn't on the desk. It always sat on the desk, exactly in the same place. Instead, it was pinned to the wall, this time with a silver letter opener, stabbed clean through the paper. There was one word scrawled in red ink across the top, read. The rules were the same, except one was missing. Rule 4, the line that used to read, if you hear crying coming from the east viewing room, don't investigate. That room was sealed for a reason, was gone. Just a blank space, as if it had never existed. But I remembered it. I remembered how it made me feel the first time I read it, like something ancient had looked up from under the floorboards. I tried to calm myself, told myself it was just a clerical error, but the air felt too still, too alert. I decided to check the east viewing room, just to be sure. I hadn't dared open it before, but now with the rule gone, was it a trap or a signal? I stood in front of the door. The handle was cold, metal slick with condensation. I hesitated, then turned it slowly. The door creaked open. The lights inside flickered on automatically motion. Sensors. The room was bare. No coffin, no flowers. Just a single chair in the center of the room. Facing the back wall. On the wall, a mirror. Floor to ceiling. But the reflection wasn't right. I was standing in the doorway, but in the mirror, I was already sitting in the chair. Back turned. still, unmoving. My breath hitched. I blinked. The reflection blinked a second later. A delay. My hands started shaking. I shut the door and backed away. I didn't run this time. I walked slowly, deliberately. I'd learned by now. Sudden movements attract attention. I returned to the front office, and the lights above me buzzed sharply. I glanced at the CCTV monitor. Camera 3. The hallway outside the east viewing room was static, but in the static, something pulsed. A rhythm, 3 beats, pause, then again, like a heartbeat trying to break through. At exactly 1:33 a.m., the building shifted. Not literally, but something in the air changed. Like gravity realigned. I stood up instinctively. That's when I heard the crying. It was faint. A child, maybe, coming from the east viewing room. The one with the mirror. The one where I was still sitting. In the reflection, I closed my eyes and counted. I remembered what I read online once: if you acknowledge it, it grows stronger. But it wasn't just crying anymore. It was humming, a lullaby. One my grandmother used to sing. In Vietnamese. My blood turned cold. No one here knew that. No one. My phone buzzed again. I was an idiot to turn it back on. The screen lit up with a text from my own number. You're still in the chair. I dropped it, didn't even bother reading it again. I walked to the break room and grabbed the emergency flashlight. I kept it now like a weapon, not for light. At 2:07 a.m., the crying stopped, replaced by silence again, but this time, a layered silence. The kind where you feel something listening, breathing, waiting. I tried to finish the shift in the office, but at 4 a.m., the lights all across the building turned off. Not a flicker, not a short, just total darkness. And then I saw it. On the CCTV screen, just as the power died, a still frame froze. Me, in the chair, eyes open, bleeding from the ears, smiling, just before the monitor cut to black. I couldn't move. I stared at the dead screen, heart hammering, breath shallow. Something was watching me from inside the system, the office. Printer suddenly clicked on. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It spit out one photo, a grainy image. The east viewing room. Me, again, in the chair. But this time, a tall shape stood behind me. All black, no face, one hand resting on my shoulder. The photo smelled like burnt hair. I dropped it and backed away. The moment the sun started to rise, the power flicked back on. Like nothing had happened, like everything reset. I packed up and ran to my car. On the passenger seat sat a new item, a sealed envelope. No stamp, no return address, just one word in calligraphy, soon. I didn't open it. I still haven't. The 6th night began with fog, a heavy, choking mist wrapped around the building like a hand that didn't want to let go. I parked in the same spot as always, but I couldn't see the front door until I was right in front of it. My headlights barely pierced the haze, and when I stepped out, the air felt thick, like it resisted every breath I tried to take. There was something taped to the door, a Polaroid. It showed me, standing in the break room, looking at the camera, except I'd never seen that photo taken. I hadn't been in that exact pose. I hadn't worn that specific shirt. My fingers trembled as I peeled it off and flipped it over. On the back, this already happened. Inside, the lights flickered more than usual. Rule 7 had started pulsing. In my head, before I even reached the front desk, never enter the basement between 3 o'clock and 3:33 a.m., no matter who asks you. I hadn't seen a basement door yet. Not once. But now, there was a new door near the back hallway. Steel, bolted, painted black, and above it, a red digital clock had appeared counting down from 3 hours to 3 a.m. I didn't like this. The building was changing again, adapting, learning me. I sat at the desk and stared at the clock. But tonight, I noticed something else. On the rules sheet, Rule 2 had changed. It now read, if someone who looks exactly like you knocks at the front door, don't let them in, don't talk to them, don't even make eye contact. They want their shift back. My mouth went dry. Their shift. What the hell did that mean? Midway through the night, at around 1:40 a.m., the fire alarm went off. Shrill, non-stop. I scrambled toward the hallway to disable it from the control box near the supply closet, but when I turned the corner, the entire hallway was gone. In its place was a narrow tunnel lined with mirrors, the kind you'd find in an old funhouse. I hesitated, turned to go back, but now the lobby was gone too. I was trapped in the reflection. Each step echoed 3 times, my own footsteps, then, to behind. I walked faster. The footsteps matched mine. I stopped. They stopped. I breathed in, held it, and that's when I heard breathing continue right behind me. I spun. Empty. I started running. The mirrors showed something I didn't want to believe. Me, running but in one mirror. I wasn't looking forward. I was looking back, at myself, smiling, bleeding again from the ears. The hallway finally ended in front of the black steel door, the one with the countdown. It was now blinking red to 59 a.m. and I heard it, knocking. From the other side. 3 knocks. Then silence. Then, a whisper, same voice as mine through the metal. You're not real. I am. I backed away slowly, but behind me, a mirror cracked, then another, and suddenly, I was surrounded by my own fractured images, laughing, crying, screaming, but not in sync, not reflections, other versions of me. Broken, twisted, degraded. I bolted. The tunnel vanished the moment I reached the main hallway, just blinked out of existence. Back in the lobby, everything was back to normal, almost. The photo was gone. The rules sheet had only 5 rules now, and I could hear footsteps on the roof. Heavy ones, pacing, and then the lights flickered once more and the final countdown started on the basement door. 30 seconds. I didn't want to know what would happen if that countdown hit 0. So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I left. I walked out the front door of the funeral home, got into my car, and started the engine. The air outside was still thick with fog, but I didn't care. I needed distance. As I reversed out of the parking lot, I glanced at the building through the mirror and froze. There was someone standing in the upstairs window. There was no upstairs, at least. There hadn't been before. I pressed the gas hard. The wheels screeched, the car jumped forward, and I didn't stop until I reached the main road. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. At exactly 6:06 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking, still shaking. My voice whispered, "You didn't finish your shift." The line went dead. That day, I called the owner. I tried to quit. I told her I wasn't comfortable, that the building was off. She was polite, said she understood, said she'd send someone else. I felt relieved. I went to sleep, finally, around 11 a.m., but when I woke up, something had changed. All the clocks in my apartment read different times, but they were all stuck. All frozen at 3:33 a.m. My reflection in the bathroom mirror blinked a second before I did. The milk in my fridge was blood. That night, I stayed home. I locked all my doors. I closed the curtains. I turned off my phone. But the lights in the hallway outside my apartment started flickering around midnight. I lived alone. No one else on my floor. Then came the knock, 3 times. Slow, measured. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I watched through the peephole. No one there. But when I turned around, my rules sheet was taped to the inside of my front door. It had grown. 10 rules now. Rule 9 said, if you miss a shift, the shift will come to you. Rule 10 said, no one quits. I spent the rest of the night pacing, watching, waiting. At 5:55 a.m., I opened the front door to check the hallway. There was no hallway, just the viewing room. From the funeral home, same chair, same curtain, same stillness. I stepped back, slammed the door, and turned every lock. Then I closed my eyes and told myself it wasn't real, that I was dreaming, that it would be gone in the morning. But when I opened my eyes, I was back in the funeral home, at the front desk, in uniform. The clock said 11:01 p.m. The shift had begun. I didn't remember walking in. I didn't remember putting on the uniform. But I was sitting at the front desk again, pen in hand, staring at the same untouched sign-in sheet, like nothing had ever happened. The only thing that told me otherwise was the new note pinned under the clock. Same messy handwriting, no more running. I stood up, slow. The funeral home was quiet, too quiet. Not the usual eerie silence, but a deeper one, like the building had stopped breathing, like it was waiting for something. I looked down the hallway. The steel basement door was gone. No countdown, no digital screen, just a stretch of dark corridor I didn't recognize, and at the very end, a door that hadn't been there before, white, cracked, slightly ajar. Against my better judgment, I moved toward it. Each step sounded muffled, like I was walking underwater. When I pushed the door open, it wasn't a room behind it, it was a staircase going down. Carved stone, not concrete, and the smell, something between damp earth and burnt hair, made my stomach twist. But my feet kept moving. I descended into the dark. At the bottom was a corridor lit only by flickering candles, stuck to the walls like dripping wax fingers. The air was cold, not just in temperature but in presence. I was not alone. At the far end was a small room. Inside, someone was standing with their back to me, still, silent, wearing the same uniform I wore. "Hello," I asked, but no response. I took a step closer, and they moved just their head, tilting slightly, unnaturally, too far to one side. Then I saw the back of their neck. There was no skin, just seams, like the edge of a mask pulled too tight. They turned fully, and I saw my own face, pale, bloodless, mouth stitched shut. But the eyes were alive and angry. It stepped toward me, slow. I stumbled backward, but the door behind me was gone. It spoke not from its mouth, but in my head. "You left." I stayed. "This is mine now." The room began to shake. Cracks appeared in the walls. The candles flared. I felt a pressure in my ears, like something was trying to break in or break out. The thing lunged. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, I was back at the front desk. Everything normal again. As normal as this place ever got. But my chest was wet. I looked down. A seam was stitched across my shirt, right where my ribs were. I pulled the fabric aside. There were stitches on my skin, and a tag, sewn in, "Property of Shift 3. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My mouth wouldn't move for a full 10 seconds, and when it did, I whispered the only thing that made sense anymore. "I'm not alone in here." I spent the rest of that night pretending everything was normal. I sat at the desk. I kept my eyes on the monitor, even though it never turned on. I drank the coffee I didn't remember making. I did everything I could to act like a person in control, but deep down, I knew something had shifted permanently. I didn't even bother checking the rules anymore. I knew they'd be different again. I didn't want to see what they'd say next, but around 3:06 a.m. I heard something that froze the blood in my veins. A voice from the hallway whispering, "Come downstairs." I didn't move. It whispered again, louder, "Come downstairs." The hallway was pitch black, but I could see shadows moving, slow, deliberate. Not from light, but from shape. I don't know how to explain it. The kind of shadows that exist even in darkness. Then a third whisper, much closer, "We can't start without you." I stood, not because I wanted to, but because something inside me did, like I was being pulled. My feet moved on their own. I turned the corner into the hallway, and it wasn't the hallway anymore. It was a chapel, a funeral in progress, candles flickering, pews lined with unmoving silhouettes, faces turned away, heads bowed. A casket at the front, open. I walked down the center aisle. I didn't want to, but I did. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through something unseen. When I reached the casket, I looked inside. It was me, dead, pale, hands crossed, stitches on my mouth, chest, eyes. A tag pinned to my suit, "Employee of the Month, Shift 3. The crowd stood. They turned. Every one of them wore my face, stitched, soulless, dozens of versions of me, clapping slowly. Then the lights went out. I don't remember how I got out. I don't remember the walk back to the front desk. But I was there, sitting again, alone. No chapel, no crowd. Just the hum of the overhead light and the ticking of a clock that didn't match time anymore. I checked my hands, still stitched, my chest tag still there. But I could move again. I breathed. I whispered, "I'm still here," and somewhere in the distance, something whispered back, "For now." That morning, I sat in the back of the employee locker room, watching the flickering light overhead. I couldn't clock out. There was no time card, no exit chime, no sun. Even though my phone insisted it was 7:42 a.m., I kept staring at my reflection in the metal door of a locker. My own eyes looked unfamiliar, as if someone else was borrowing them from the inside. I needed answers, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to look for them. I pulled out the small ring of keys given to me on day one, the ones I'd never touched, the ones I was told were just for emergencies. One of them had a red ribbon tied to it. I'd never noticed that before. I don't know why, but I knew where it belonged. At the end of the corridor behind the embalming room, past the locked supplies cabinet, there was a door with no knob, just a small slit, rusted and cold. I slid the key in. It clicked. The door opened inward with a sigh. The air inside felt ancient. The hallway was lined with drawers like morgue coolers, but these had names carved directly into the metal. No labels, no handles. Just long horizontal slabs with names like Charles, unsorted, or Mirna error. As I stepped deeper in, I saw a drawer labeled ISAAC incomplete. My name. My knees nearly gave out. I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the surface, a sharp noise like a camera shutter rang out. Behind me, the drawers began to open one by one, slowly, sliding out without assistance. Each one contained a figure. Not bodies, not corpses, but replicas perfect, mannequin-like replicas of people I'd never met. Each had a stitched mouth and stitched eyes. Each was wearing the same uniform as me. They weren't lifeless though. Their chests moved subtly. Breathing, I backed away, bumping into something. I turned. My own drawer had opened. Inside was me again, not dead, not still, but twitching. Smiling faintly, it reached for me. I ran. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it 3 times. My chest felt like it was collapsing. I couldn't breathe properly until I reached the supply closet, curled up behind a mop bucket. I checked my arms. My veins looked black under my skin. Not blue, not red, black, like something had been replaced, like my blood had been rewritten. I wanted to scream, but I remembered Rule 3, do not scream. It shows them where you are. So I sat there, in the dark, behind bleach bottles and broken shelves, trying to remember who I was before I ever took this job. But nothing came. Not a single memory outside these walls. Not even my last name. That's when I realized I wasn't just losing myself. I was being overwritten, one shift at a time. That night, the rules returned, but they were written differently. Same old typewriter, same yellow paper, but the tone had changed. It felt personal. The top of the page no longer said rules for the night shift. It now read, ISAACs. Reminders. I didn't remember writing them, but it was in my handwriting. Rule 1, don't trust what remembers your name. Rule 2, the intercom will lie. Don't follow its instructions. Rule 3, if your reflection blinks before you do, apologize and back away slowly. Rule 4, there is no Rule 4. There never was. Rule 5, don't go to the basement, even if they're screaming for help. Rule 6, do not eat anything offered to you after midnight. Rule 7, do not forget these are reminders, not rules. You've done this before. My hands trembled as I finished reading. Something about them felt like déjà vu twisted through a nightmare. I shoved the paper into my pocket and walked the perimeter of the building, hoping the motion would ground me. The halls were longer than they used to be. Doors that didn't exist before now appeared where plain walls once stood, and none of them led where they were supposed to. I tested a door that should have gone into the back office, but it opened to a hospital hallway lit in harsh white light. I saw a gurney wheeling itself across the floor with no one pushing it. The intercom above buzzed, code blue, room 1313. Bring Isaac immediately. My breath hitched. That was my name, and there was no room 1313 in this funeral home. I closed the door hard and turned the lock. A whisper followed from the keyhole. You're late. I backed away and ran into another door, unmarked. I opened it without thinking and found myself in the viewing room. Only it wasn't like before. The chairs were stacked upside down. The walls were covered in what looked like funeral programs. Hundreds of them, all with my name, all with different dates. Isaac L. born, died, multiple times. My face on each one aged. Youthful, distorted, burned, drowned. My deaths had already been documented. I fell to my knees. Then I heard clapping, slow, deliberate. from the casket at the front of the room. I looked up. The lid was ajar. My hand reached for it before I could stop myself. Inside was nothing, just a mirror, and it showed me sitting there, clapping, watching myself. I slammed it shut and bolted out of the room. Every hallway now felt like a maze built from bad memories I didn't remember having. I ended up in the elevator. Even though I never used it before, there were only 2 buttons, down and further. I didn't press anything, but the elevator moved. The elevator didn't stop. It didn't shake. It didn't hum. It just moved, like it was sliding through something thicker than air, something that resisted being traveled. I lost track of time, but eventually the doors opened, not with a ding, but with a sound like breath being drawn through dry teeth. What lay beyond wasn't a basement, it was a waiting room. Not modern, this one was 1970s wood paneling, velvet chairs, a soda machine that only dispensed glass bottles. The TV in the corner played static, except occasionally it showed flashes of my own face, sleeping, or crying, or covered in blood. No one else was there, but there were signs of people, a purse on a chair, a hat still warm, a newspaper dated tomorrow. I walked slowly toward the receptionist's desk, which looked like it had been abandoned for years. On the desk was a guest book. The names inside weren't written in ink, but scratched into the paper like claw marks. My name appeared 5 times each, one slightly more mangled. ISAAC, Isaac. I5 for AC, then redacted. And the last one, I was never here. I closed the book and stepped back. That's when I heard humming, low, childlike, coming from the hallway labeled Viewing Room B. Against every instinct in me, I followed it. The hallway smelled like old flowers and something worse underneath, like time that had rotted. I found the room. The door was ajar, and the humming grew louder as I approached. Inside was a child, sitting in one of the pews, back turned. They wore my uniform, my name tag, Isaac. I whispered. They turned around. It wasn't a child. It was small, yes, but its face was ancient. Its eyes were sunken and glassy, and when it opened its mouth to continue the humming, the sound came from 1,000 mouths at once, like a choir inside its throat. I stumbled back, slamming into a nearby chair. The thing stood, tilting its head. "You remember now?" it asked. "You promised not to forget this time." I turned to run, but the door had disappeared. The walls had melted into curtains, and behind them were dozens of caskets, each one with a small plaque that read, "For when he forgets again." I ran blindly, pulling at the curtains, the plaques, the fabric, trying to find an exit. One curtain opened to reveal a staircase. I took it without thinking. Every step felt like falling, but eventually I hit solid floor. I was back in the embalming room. Everything was normal, clean, lit, silent. A clock on the wall read 3:03 a.m., and the paper shredder was running, chewing through pages that looked like rules. I watched the last one go in. It read, "Final reminder, don't trust the endings. They lie." The embalming room was quiet again, unnervingly so. It almost felt like the world had rebooted. The humming was gone. The lights were steady. No doors were missing or misplaced. It was as if the nightmare had folded itself away, leaving no trace except for the faint odor of metal and burnt paper. I looked down. My shoes were wet, not with blood or embalming fluid, but with rainwater. Yet I hadn't stepped outside. The shredder was still chewing paper, even though I hadn't seen a single sheet left. I unplugged it, and it groaned like something alive being denied food. As the blades stopped, a single strip of paper dangled from the slot, half chewed. It read, "You're not done yet." That's when the light above me flickered and I noticed something. A small security camera in the corner that had never been there before. Its red light blinked slowly, as if it were breathing, watching. I moved toward it, half expecting it to vanish, but it stayed. A tiny speaker beneath it crackled. "Isaac," it said in a voice I didn't recognize, but that felt intimate, like it had whispered in my dreams. "You've been selected." I didn't respond. The speaker continued, "Report to the casket storage room immediately." I should have refused. I should have ripped the camera from the wall, but my legs were already moving. The hallway stretched longer than it ever had. The doors along it were wrong again, each labeled with names. Isaac's bedroom, Isaac's first lie, Isaac's last meal. I ignored them. I found the casket storage. It was open. Inside, dozens of coffins stacked like shelves, like a library for the dead. Each one was sealed, except for one in the center of the room, open. Waiting. My name was engraved on a brass plate at its foot. I approached and looked inside. No corpse, no mirror, just stairs down. I hesitated. Then the speaker crackled again. From somewhere above. Clock out or clock in deeper. Your choice. The lights dimmed. I stepped into the casket. The stairs were narrow, wooden, and impossibly long. I descended. Heart pounding, walls closing in. The air got colder. The sound of my own breath bounced back at me, like something mimicking me just a second too late. After what felt like 100 steps, the stairs ended. A small room. No doors, no windows. Just a chair and a typewriter. On it was a blank sheet of paper. Beside it, my employee badge. But the photo on it had changed. It showed me older, eyes hollow, lips smiling in a way that didn't feel like mine. I sat, not because I wanted to, but because there was nothing else to do. The typewriter began to type on its own, line by line. Rule 1, if you're reading this, you've already been here. Rule 2, don't try to win, just try to remember. Rule 3, memory is the first death. Rule 4, you are the last version that hasn't failed. I reached for the keys. My fingers moved without thought, and I started writing again. Rules I didn't recognize, but my hands remembered them. Somewhere above, I heard the funeral home's door chime ring. Someone had just walked in. I typed faster. The typewriter stopped, not because I finished, but because something else wanted control again. The keys began to move without me, as if the machine had grown tired of my slowness. Words appeared, one after another, written in a hurried rhythm. Almost like panic. He's here, don't look up. He remembers you. Play dumb. I froze. The room was still small, still windowless, still mine, but the temperature dropped fast. My breath came out as mist, curling over the typewriter like smoke. The machine typed again. Breathe like you're asleep. Do not blink too fast. Do not make eye contact. I didn't know what he meant. Not exactly. But deep inside, I did. It was the thing that lives between forgetfulness and routine. The thing that feeds on repetition and rituals. The one that makes rules feel sacred because it feeds on their violation. I heard slow footsteps. Not from a hallway. From nowhere. Like sound slipping through the cracks of reality itself. They circled the walls, dragging something behind. A breath like gravel followed close behind. Then a voice, still trying to be different. It asked. I didn't respond. I stared at the blank sheet in the typewriter and prayed my eyelids didn't flutter too quickly. The voice circled again, this time behind my ear. You wrote the first rules. Do you think you deserve to break them now? My heart pounded, but my hands didn't move. I wasn't sure if the fear was mine or if I was remembering someone else's. Another Isaac, one of the failed versions. The voice continued, softer now, like a lullaby rotting from the inside. What's worse, Isaac forgetting who you are, or remembering what you did? Then came the laughter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was as sad, tired, like it had been telling the same joke for centuries, and still waited for someone to laugh with it. The typewriter typed one more line. Say it back to him. I didn't know what, but I opened my mouth, and something came out. The rules keep us alive, even if we wrote them in our own blood. Silence. Long, bitter silence. Then the thing exhaled. Not angrily, not even satisfied. Just done. The cold began to lift. The breath around me slowed. The sound of dragging retreated. I waited until the keys typed again. It's safe. For now. The lights above flickered. The walls of the room started to dissolve, pixel by pixel, like a dream losing resolution. In their place, darkness, wide, open. I stood. And the floor followed me, forming with each step I took. Like the rules themselves were building my path in real time. As long as I kept believing they existed. Ahead of me, a door appeared. White, cracked, familiar. I opened it and found myself back in the funeral home lobby. Same time, same rain outside. But the clock had no hands now. The soda machine hummed. The velvet chairs were dusty again. And standing at the reception desk was someone I knew. Me. Younger, not smiling, holding a pen, about to sign in. He looked up, and I saw myself see me. He looked just like I did when I started, same hair, same nervous posture, same uncertainty in his eyes, like he hadn't yet learned how many wrong doors this place had. I stood frozen by the hallway, unsure if I was the ghost or he was. He didn't seem to see me, but I saw the hesitation in his hand before the pen touched the logbook. I remembered that hesitation. It wasn't about the job. It was about the whisper I thought I heard in the back of my mind even then. A whisper I later learned was the rules trying to find their way in. He signed the book. The moment the ink dried, the air changed again. The lights dimmed slightly, and I felt it a pull, like something had just been reloaded. The loop, the system, it was repeating, but this time I was still here, and that wasn't supposed to happen. I turned away before he could look up again, afraid of what it might do if we locked eyes, or worse, if we remembered the same moment. At once, I walked toward the prep room again, but the funeral home wasn't quite the same anymore. The walls shimmered like wet paint refusing to dry. Doors appeared where they shouldn't, and some were labeled in handwriting I recognized as mine. "Break room, don't go in again," one read. Another said, "Do not knock unless you know who you are." The weirdest one was a door that simply said, "Last chance." I avoided all of them. I reached the main hallway and saw the furnace room door was slightly ajar. Inside, the embers glowed as if recently stoked. That shouldn't be possible. No one had used the furnace in days. I stepped in, slowly, and found something new, a mirror mounted above the ashes. It hadn't been there before. Written across its surface in condensation were 3 words, "You were warned." Beneath the mirror sat a box sealed with wax, a faint hum coming from inside it. There was no lock, no latch, just a feeling, and the longer I looked at it, the more I felt like it wasn't meant to be opened. At least not by me. I turned back. The hallway behind me was gone. In its place, a staircase, wooden, narrow, leading up instead of down. That was new. The funeral home didn't have a second floor, but this staircase breathed, almost pulsed, like it was alive. I climbed it. Each step creaked like it remembered all who had passed. The walls on either side were covered in old funeral cards, obituaries, dates, prayers. All were for people named Isaac. Different last names, different years, some from the 1800s, some from decades yet to come. I reached the top. One door, blackwood, a small plaque, observation deck. I opened it and stepped out, not into a room, but onto the roof. But not the roof I knew. The sky wasn't night. It was something older than night, red, swirling like a storm of dried blood. The air smelled like burnt incense and rust. In the center of the roof stood a chair facing outward. Someone sat in it. I walked closer, every instinct telling me not to. When I reached the back of the chair, I froze. The man sitting there was me, older, thinner, hollow-eyed. He turned to look at me, and unlike the younger version earlier, this one saw me. "You made it further than most," he said, "but not far enough." I tried to speak, but he raised a hand. "Let me guess. You think you can break the loop, burn the rules, rewrite them?" He leaned back and smiled, teeth gray like old ash. "We all do, at first." I asked him what the point of any of this was, why I had to relive these rules, these corridors, this madness. He looked out into the sky. "Because every rule is a chain. But without chains, what keeps the dead from walking back in?" He stood, leaving the chair empty. "You want to live, then write better chains." And with that, he stepped off the roof into the swirling red below and vanished. The chair turned to face me, waiting. I didn't sit down right away. The chair faced nothing, just the void. That impossible red sky churning like it was alive, like it was watching. But I knew that was the final test. Sit down, and you become the next observer, the next keeper, the next Isaac in a long line of Isaacs, each trying to rewrite their own story, each trapped in the funeral home's game of rules and memory. Behind me, the door I came through had vanished. The roof was the only reality left. And the chair, well, it wasn't really a chair anymore. It pulsed, just slightly, with warmth, like a heart, like it was waiting for mine to sync up. I thought. Of the new guy downstairs, the one who looked just like me. He hadn't seen what I'd seen. Not yet. But he would, because that's how this place works. It feeds on those who think they can outsmart it, who think they're just signing up for a paycheck and a few lonely nights with the dead. And in return, it gives you glimpses, clues, just enough to make you think you're the exception until you're the next warning carved into the walls. I sat down. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sky cracked, and I saw it. The funeral home from above, from outside time, each room moving, shifting like organs in a living creature. And I understood. The rules weren't about safety, they were containment. The job was never about embalming or prepping bodies. It was about holding something back, holding them back. Every ignored rule had been a tear in the skin of the world. And every time I followed a rule, I wasn't saving myself, I was stitching a wound. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since my first night on the job, I felt clarity. Not peace, not safety, but understanding. I couldn't escape, no one could. But I could delay, distract, misdirect. I could write the rules for the next one, better ones, stricter ones, maybe even kinder ones. And so I did. I opened my eyes and found myself back in the office, sitting at the reception desk. Dawn was breaking. The light was gray-blue, soft. The new guy was sleeping in the break room chair, arms crossed, and in front of me, the logbook was open to a fresh page. A pen waited beside it. I began to write. New rules. 1. Never let them see you bleed. 2. If you hear your name more than once, pretend it's not you. 3. If the elevator moves without buttons pressed, brace yourself. 4. Don't try to remember what's in viewing room B5. Never finish the soda from the vending machine. 6. If you find the stairway going up, wake yourself. You're not supposed to be dreaming. 7. Trust the shadows that run, fear the ones that watch. 8. At 3:03 a.m., pray but don't say it out loud. 9. If the furnace is warm, write faster. Time is short. 10. When you reach the rooftop, sit, or someone else will. I closed the book and placed the pen back gently. The hum of the place settled into its rhythm. Somewhere below, the pipes groaned like breath, the floor creaked like a heartbeat, and outside, the funeral home stood just as it always had, quiet, still, and waiting. Until the next one. If you're still here, you followed every rule, and maybe now, you understand why they're more than just words. If this story made your skin crawl or your mind race, hit the subscribe button and join us again for the next shift. Because in this place, the night never truly ends and the rules, they're still being written. Don't forget to leave a comment. Your story might just become the next one we tell.